The nanny slapped the girl. Not once, not twice. The girl started crying, not the small kind of crying, the deep kind. The kind that fills a street and doesn't stop. The kind that a child makes when the pain is not new, when the body already knows this feeling and is simply too tired to fight it. The black waitress heard it. She was in her car, windows down, engine running. A woman with nowhere to be and every reason to keep driving. She didn't keep driving. She got out. She followed the sound. Her feet moved before her mind caught up, and then she saw it. The raised hand, the small face. The little girl folding into herself like she had already accepted what was coming. Nina didn't shout. She didn't run. She just walked straight across that courtyard and put her body between that child and that woman's hand. And she stood there, still, unmovable, like a wall. What she did not know was whose daughter she had just saved. If you're watching this for the first time, welcome to AfroKorean Noir Stories. We tell stories about real love, real danger, and the kind of courage that comes from ordinary people in extraordinary moments. If this story moves you, and I believe it will, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. For those of you already in this family, thank you for being here. Let's get into the story. Nina Adeze Okafor opened her locker on the last day of November and looked at the piece of paper inside it for the 300 and something time. It was a printed car listing. Dark blue Hyundai Tucson 2019 model, 87,000 kilometers. She had folded it twice so it fit neatly against the back wall of the locker. The corners had gone soft. The ink had faded slightly along the crease. She looked at it every shift. She closed the locker, put on her apron, and went to work. Nina had been in Seoul for 4 years. She came from Lagos, Nigeria, with one suitcase and a hospitality degree that no one ever asked to see. On the plane, she had made herself a promise. She would not go back home until she had something real to show for all the distance. Not something borrowed, something she built herself. She was 27. 5'6", her coworkers at the restaurant said she had a serious face. Not cold, just still. Her regulars said she had kind eyes. Her mother, before she passed, always said Nina had her grandmother's jaw. Strong, stubborn, the kind of jaw that doesn't fold under pressure. Her mother was gone now, 3 years. Nina had gone back for 1 week, buried her, listened to her aunties tell her to come home for good, and then returned to Seoul. Because her mother had spent her last months saying one thing, keep going. And the only thing left Nina could do for her was mean it. She showed up to every shift, uniform pressed at the collar, notepad clean, shoes right for 6 hours of standing. She had regulars who asked for her section by name. A retired judge who ordered the same abalone soup every visit and tipped in crisp notes folded, precisely in half. 2 older women who called her their Nina and showed up every autumn with bags of persimmons from their garden. A young architect who sat at her table for 3 hours one night after his engagement fell apart, barely speaking, and who came back years later with a new ring and said, "You didn't say anything that night. You just kept the glass full. I needed that more than advice." Nina never thought of herself as someone special. She thought of herself as someone who showed up. Her coworker Bora asked her once how she kept doing it. Same energy every single day, like nothing ever got to her. Nina looked at her and said, "What's the alternative?" Bora laughed. Nina wasn't joking. The car fund was at 11 months. She was almost there. And every time she opened that locker and looked at that listings, she reminded herself what almost there meant. It meant the sacrifices were adding up. It meant the tired mornings had a direction. It meant a woman who came from Lagos with nothing was building something real with her own hands, one shift at a time. She was almost there. But on a Thursday evening in March, 3 months before everything changed, something walked through the front door of Yeon Garden restaurant that Nina had not planned for. He came in at 9 o'clock, 2 hours before closing. 2 men followed him, close enough to respond to anything, far enough to pretend they weren't there. He wore a dark suit, no tie, a watch that probably cost more than Nina's year of savings. His expression was so completely controlled it looked carved into him rather than worn. He walked to table 7 and sat down. Nina had served powerful men, rich men. Men with danger around them. She was not impressed by any of it. But this man stopped her in a way she didn't immediately understand. And it took her 30 full seconds to figure out why. His eyes were tired. Not the tired of someone working long hours. The deeper tired. The kind that lives in the chest. The kind you get when you've been carrying something for so long you've forgotten what it felt like not to carry it. She went to his table. Professional. Warm but not excessive. She told him her name. She gave the specials. She asked, still or sparkling. He looked up at her, not past her, not through her, at her, directly. Still water, he said, and whatever you think I should eat. Nina paused for exactly 1 second. Then she wrote something on her notepad and walked to the kitchen. She came back with braised short rib in a black garlic reduction, stone pot rice, and cold barley tea. No explanation. She had looked at him and made a call. This was a man who needed something warm, something that took a long time to cook, something that tasted like someone had actually thought about him. He ate slowly. He said nothing. He finished every bite. When she came to clear the table, he looked up and said, "How did you know what to bring?" "You looked like someone who needed something warm," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he left the most generous tip she'd received in 2 years. She folded the money and added it to the car fund. He came back the following Thursday, and the Thursday after that. By the 5th visit, she had his rhythm mapped, whatever you think. And she never got it wrong. Not once. She still didn't know who he was. That changed on a Thursday in April, when Bora pulled her behind the service window and said, "Do you know who that man is?" "He's a regular," Nina said. "His name is Kwon Jae-hyun," Bora said. Like the name itself was a weather event. "He runs the Kwon Syndicate. Half the underground operations in Gangnam and Mapo go through him. He's never been arrested. Not once in his life." Nina looked through the window at the man sitting alone at table 7, eating in slow, careful bites, looking like someone with nowhere comfortable to put a weight he'd been carrying for a long time. "He tips well," she said, and she went back to work. What Bora didn't know, and what no one in that restaurant knew, was that Kwon Jae-hyun had a daughter, and that everything that was about to happen had already started, months ago, behind a closed door in a house on the other side of the city. Her name was Kwon Soo-ah, 8 years old. She had her father's precise features but softened, like the same image drawn with a gentler hand. Wide eyes that noticed everything. A small, serious mouth. Hair she wore in 2 uneven pigtails she always did herself, because she didn't like people touching her head. She was the kind of child who read instead of watching television, who asked questions that made adults shift in their chairs, who laughed, when she did laugh, with her whole body, like the feeling was too big to stay contained. Her mother's name was Eunji. Eunji had been brilliant and restless, and the kind of woman who lit up a room just by walking in. She and Jae-hyun had been together when they were young, before he became what he became, or maybe during the becoming, which is harder to see clearly from the inside. They loved each other the way young people do, when the world feels like it's just opening up. Soo-ah was born when Jae-hyun was 26. But Eunji and Jae-hyun wanted completely different lives. Not small different, structurally different. The kind that can't share the same space no matter how hard 2 people try. When Soo-ah was 6, Eunji sat across from Jae-hyun at the kitchen table and told him the truth. "I have things I need to become," she said. "I can't become them if I stay, I'm sorry." She wasn't cruel, she didn't shout. She was just honest, the way honest things sometimes cut cleaner than cruelty. She left a note for Soo-ah on the kitchen counter before she walked out the door. The note said, "You will grow up to be extraordinary. I know it. I'm sorry I won't be there to see it." Soo-ah read it 4 times. Then she folded it into a square the size of a stamp and put it in the pocket of her school uniform. She carried it there every day for 6 months. The paper went soft along the fold lines. Then one day she stopped carrying it. She never asked about her mother again. Not once. Jae-hyun watched all of it. The reading, the folding, the carrying, the stopping. He was a man who had faced down danger without flinching. He had made decisions that broke other men. He had built something powerful from nothing through pure calculation and will. He had never felt helpless until he watched his 6-year-old daughter decide, quietly, alone, to close a door inside herself and lock it. He tried. He genuinely tried. He moved her to a better school. He bought books, stacks of them, because she loved to read. He hired security that didn't look like security. He sat beside her on the couch in the evenings while she read, not always reading himself, just close to her. Like proximity could cover for the hours he wasn't there. But his world didn't take breaks. And the day he showed weakness was the day the people around him started measuring angles. So he did the only thing he could think to do. He hired a nanny. Her name was Choi Yoon-soo. Excellent references, 3 previous employers, glowing reports across the board. Background check clean. No issues, 51 years old, round face, soft voice. The kind of manner that made parents feel like they'd made the right call. She spoke warmly to Soo-ah in the interview. She knew the names of Soo-ah's favorite books. She said all the right things. Jae-hyun believed her. This is important to understand. He was not careless. He was not naive. He was a man who read people for a living. He had survived in a world where reading people wrong meant permanent consequences. He believed her because she was very, very good at being believed. Suas noticed something different. In those first few days, a sharpness in Madame Choi's voice that appeared the moment Jae-hyun left the room. A look that vanished too quickly when a door opened. A smile that never reached the eyes the same way her father's did. Rare as his smiles were. But Sua said nothing. She waited, and she was right to be afraid of what she was waiting for. It started small. A sharp word when her shoes were in the wrong place. A meal delayed when she spilled water. Rules that appeared without reason and changed without warning. You eat when I say, you speak when I allow it, and you do not go running to your father with every little thing. He has enough to carry. You will not add to his burden. Within 2 weeks, Sua had mapped the whole thing. Madame Choi was a completely different person when Jae-hyun was home. The performance was precise, and it was designed for one audience, her father. Sua understood that she was alone with this, because Madame Choi had told her, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, if you complain, I leave. And then what happens to you? Do you know what happens to children who become inconvenient? Do you know what happens to little girls with no mother and a father who can't be home? Sua was 8. She didn't know which threats were real. She only knew she was afraid. So she did what afraid children do when they have no safe place to run. She went quiet. The rules multiplied. Reading was declared antisocial. Madame Choi would lift books mid-chapter with no reason except, enough. Sua started hiding them. Under the bed, behind the stuffed animals. Inside a pillowcase near the window. She read under the covers with a small flashlight after Madame Choi had done the final check. The hair changed. Madame Choi decided the 2 uneven pigtails were messy and began braiding Sua's hair tightly every morning, pulling harder than necessary. When Sua's eyes watered, Madame Choi said, "Stop being dramatic. Sit still. You're impossible." Then the words got worse, slow, clumsy. No wonder your mother left. That last one, Sua never forgot. When Jae-hyun came home each evening, Madame Choi was warm and professional and full of small, encouraging reports about Sua's day. Sua sat at the dinner table and answered her father's questions in short sentences and said she was fine. She was not fine. But she had calculated, the way children under pressure calculate, that telling the truth had 2 possible outcomes. Either Madame Choi left and something worse arrived, or Madame Choi stayed and made the punishment for telling far worse than the thing being hidden. Either way, silence felt like the safer door. She counted the hours until her father came home. And when he was there, sitting on the couch beside her, she would lean against his arm just slightly. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to feel the warmth of someone safe nearby. He would reach over without looking up and rest his hand gently on her head. He didn't know. That was the worst part. He was right there, and he didn't know. Here is what no one understood about Sua. She wasn't just surviving. She was protecting him. She had watched her father come home exhausted every single night. She had seen the weight behind his eyes that never fully went away. And she had decided, at 8 years old, that she would not add to it. That whatever was happening to her was hers to carry. She was wrong. But she didn't know that yet. Months passed. And then Saturday the 14th of June arrived. Nina Adaze Okafor walked out of a car dealership in Yeouido as the legal owner of a dark blue 20 Hyundai Tucson. Clean interior. 87 diesel kilometers on the clock. The listing she'd kept folded in her locker for 11 months was now the title in her hand. She'd taken the subway to the dealership. She drove herself home. She sat in the parking lot of the dealership for 4 full minutes before she allowed herself to feel it, and when she felt it, she cried, not the sad kind, the other kind. The kind that comes when something you've been carrying carefully for a very long time finally arrives. When you realize the sacrifices were not wasted. When the distance between who you were and what you promised yourself closes, even just a little, and your body doesn't know how to handle the relief except through water. 4 minutes. Then she wiped her face, took 1 breath, and drove. She had nowhere particular to go. She just drove, through the city, through streets she usually only saw from subway windows, feeling the specific pleasure of a wheel that belonged to her, and a road that went wherever she decided. She ended up in a quiet residential area near Mapogu, tree-lined streets, high gates, houses set back behind walls. The kind of neighborhood where everything looks curated and nothing looks uncertain. She was driving slowly, looking at nothing specific, windows down, the summer morning warm and easy, Then she heard it, a child crying. She slowed down. Not a scraped knee cry, not a tantrum. Not the ordinary noise of childhood frustration. This was different. This was a child who had been crying so long she had already passed through the loud part and arrived somewhere quieter and more broken. The kind of crying that happens when the body is too exhausted for the sound to be big anymore, but the pain hasn't gone anywhere at all. Nina pulled to the curb. She sat for one moment. The city was full of sounds she had earned this morning. It was not her business. The sound came again. She turned off the engine. She got out of the car. And she followed the sound down the pavement until she found a low iron gate in a boundary wall. Decorative, slightly open, unlatched. She pushed it. It swung inward without resistance. She stepped into a side courtyard between two large houses. Stone path. Garden furniture stacked against one wall. Shade from trees above. Quiet. And in the middle of the courtyard, a woman and a child. The woman was in her 50s, heavy-set, house clothes. Her face wore the expression of someone who believes completely that what they are doing is necessary and correct. She had the girl by the upper arm, gripping, not holding. The girl was small, thin, a school jacket 2 sizes too larges. A braid half undone on the left side, eyes fixed on the ground. Nina saw all of this in 1 second. In the next second, the woman raised her hand. The slap landed on the left side of the girl's face. The sound crossed the courtyard like something solid. The girl made no sound. She didn't cry out. She didn't flinch back. She simply absorbed it. The way a person absorbs something the body has already learned to absorb. The eyes going somewhere behind themselves. Somewhere the pain couldn't reach. That was the thing that stopped Nina's heart, not the slap. The silence after. A child who has been hit enough times stops reacting. The body learns to go still, to go somewhere inside itself, to wait it out. That stillness, that specific, terrible stillness, told Nina everything she needed to know about how long this had been happening. She was across the courtyard before she'd decided to move. She stepped between the woman and the girl. Back to the child. Body between the two of them. Don't, she said, one word. No shout, no drama, flat, absolute. Like a door being closed on something that is not allowed to continue. The woman blinked. She hadn't heard anyone come in. She rearranged her face quickly into outrage. Who are you? This is private property. I am this child's caretaker, and I have every right to. You are not her mother, Nina said. I am her legal guardian. I have been employed to. This is not discipline, Nina said, very calmly. I know what discipline looks like. This is not it. She didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She stood there with the precise stillness of a woman who has spent years holding the center of difficult rooms and knows exactly how to make her presence felt without making noise. Madame Choi took one small step back, and then, behind Nina, at the hem of her jacket. Small fingers closed around the fabric, just 2 fingers, tight, desperate, the way a person holds on when they have run out of everywhere else to go. Nina reached back with one hand, and she covered those small fingers with her own. She didn't look at the child. She didn't look away from Madame Choi. She just held on, and held her ground. She had no idea whose daughter she was protecting. She was about to find out. Inside the main house, Park Ji-soo looked at the screen of his phone and his face shifted. Boss, he said quietly. Kwon Jae-hyun looked up from the desk. Situation outside. North Courtyard. Jae-hyun was on his feet before Ji-soo finished the sentence. He came around the outer wall of the house and stopped. The first thing he saw was Madame Choi, red-faced, arms crossed. The posture of someone caught, building a version of events. The second thing he saw was a woman he recognized. Standing with her back to him, shoulders steady, one hand behind her, holding something. It took him half a second, without the uniform, without the restaurant, to be certain. Nina. He looked past her. Soo-ah. His daughter was pressed behind Nina's back, both hands gripping the jacket now, her face turned slightly to the side, and on the left side of her face, below the cheekbone, the red beginning of a mark that hadn't been there this morning. The world went very quiet around Kwon Jae-hyun, not the quiet of calm, the quiet that comes before something irrevocable. His men, who had followed him around the corner, stopped exactly where they were. They had seen this stillness before. They knew what it meant. They did not speak. They did not move. Appa. The word broke on the first syllable. It was the sound of a child who has been holding something alone for months, who has been smiling at dinner and saying she's fine, and counting hours and leaning just slightly against a safe arm and not saying a word. It was the sound of all of that, released in one small word. Jae-hyun crossed the courtyard and knelt on the ground in front of his daughter, a man who does not kneel, who has built an entire world on the principle of never showing what it costs him. He knelt in the dirt of his own courtyard without one moment of hesitation. "Sua," he said, just her name, as gently as he knew how to say anything. She looked at him. Her eyes were full, but she hadn't let it break yet. She was still holding it, even now, still protecting him from the full weight of it. "How long?" he said. She pressed her lips together. The dam held for one more second. Then she said, "A long time, Appa, a very long time." He pulled her into his arms. She held on with both hands and finally, let it go. Behind him, he heard Nina take one quiet step backward, beginning to withdraw, doing what she always did, showing up completely, and then stepping out of the frame when the thing was done. No fuss, no claim on the moment, just present when needed, and then gone. "Wait," he said. He didn't turn around. She stopped. What happened to Madame Choi in the next 20 minutes is not something that occurred in public view. Jae-hyun had Jisoo take Sua and Nina inside. Then he had a conversation with Choi Yoon-soo in the courtyard. He did not raise his voice. He never did in situations like this. Men who shouted were putting on a show for an audience. He had no audience and no interest in shows. He told her, in a very quiet, very specific way, what her life would look like if she ever spoke about his daughter, his home, or this afternoon to any person, for any reason, for the rest of her life. She understood him completely. She left the property. She did not look back. Some doors, once closed by the right person, stay closed forever. Nina found herself in the kitchen. She had not planned this. She had planned to make sure the child was safe, hand her off, and go back to her car and her Saturday and the coffee she'd been thinking about since Yeouido. Instead, she was sitting at a kitchen counter in a house twice the size of her building, holding a cup of tea someone had placed in front of her without asking, watching something she had not expected to see. Kwon Jae-hyun, the man Bora had described in a whisper, the man who controlled operations across districts, who walked into restaurants and made rooms rearrange themselves, was kneeling on his kitchen floor, trying to fix his daughter's braid. He was not good at it. He was working slowly, carefully, redoing the same section 3 times. His hands were large and precise in other ways entirely. The ways that came with the world he lived in. And right now they were completely out of their depth with something small and soft that needed a completely different kind of skill. Sua sat on the kitchen counter and watched him with an expression that Nina felt somewhere behind her ribs. It was the look of a child who loves someone completely, and who has been waiting for a long time to feel fully seen by that person. And who is now, finally just seen, no performance, no protection, just seen. Nobody spoke for several minutes. The kitchen smelled like barley tea and clean wood. Afternoon light came in flat across the counter. Sua's school jacket hung from the back of a chair. Outside, a bird moved through the garden and then was gone. Then Sua's looked straight across at Nina, the way children look at people when they've already decided something, and said, "You come to Yeon Garden, I've seen pictures. Appa talks about the restaurant." Nina glanced at Jae-hyun. He did not look up from the braid. "He says the food is good," Sua continued. "It is good," Nina said. "He says Sua." His voice was very calm and very final. Sua pressed her lips together with the expression of someone who has said exactly enough and is completely satisfied with the result. Nina looked down at her tea. She stayed 2 hours. She hadn't planned that either. But Sua asked, with the careful hesitation of a child who has learned that asking for things sometimes gets the thing taken away, if she could show Nina her books, and Nina said yes. They sat on the living room floor. Sua pulled books from under the couch, more from behind the stuffed animals, a small pile from inside a pillowcase near the window. She laid them around herself on the carpet like she was reclaiming land. "She didn't like me reading," Sua said simply, arranging the books. "So I hid them. She never found all of them." The quiet pride in her voice over one small thing she had managed to protect was something Nina would not forget for the rest of her life. She sat with Sua and listened, actually listened. Not the performed listening of an adult tolerating a child, the real kind, because Sua had things worth hearing, because this child had spent months being told her voice was unwelcome. And the leastest Nina could give her right now was proof that it wasn't. Jae-hyun sat in the armchair across the room. He didn't join the conversation. He just stayed nearby, like the closeness itself meant something. When Nina finally stood to go, he walked her to the front door. He said, "Thank you." "I didn't do anything special," she said. "You stood between her and what was hurting her." He paused. "There are men I pay very well who were standing in the wrong place today. I just heard her crying," she said. "Most people hear things and keep walking." She had nothing to say to that. It was true. She walked to her car, got in, drove. She didn't look back in the mirror, she almost did. He came to the restaurant that Thursday, table 7, 9 o'clock. Whatever you think. She brought him sea bream with chrysanthemum broth, clean, precise, light. He ate slowly. He left nothing. When she came to clear the tables, he said, "How is the car?" She stopped, turned back slowly. "I mentioned it once," she said. 11 months ago. You were talking to your coworker. I was at the bar." She looked at him. "You were listening." He said nothing, which was its own answer. "The car is good," she said. "It's very good." He stood to leave. Then at the door, he turned back, the expression of a man executing a decision before he could reconsider it. "Sua asks about you. She wants to know if you like books." Nina held his gaze. "Tell her yes, she can give me her recommendations." He nodded once, left. Bora appeared at Nina's elbow before the door had closed. "What was that?" "He left a tip," Nina said, and went back to work. But something had shifted. She felt it on the walk home. She felt it in the way she thought about the next Thursday, in a way she hadn't thought about the previous ones. She told herself it was nothing. She didn't entirely believe it. Here is what she didn't know yet. For Jae-hyun, the Thursdays had already shifted long before the courtyard. He was a man surrounded entirely by people who wanted something from him. His whole world was transactional. Every alliance had terms, every loyalty had a price, every relationship was, underneath it, a negotiation. He'd learned to function in that world. He was exceptional at it. But it had cost him, over the years, the ability to simply be in a room without calculating what the room needed from him. He didn't calculate with Nina. She didn't want anything from him. She wasn't angling for anything. She had her own plan, her own savings, her own project of becoming someone on her terms. She had no interest in his world and no fear of it either. She had simply, once, heard his daughter crying, and she'd walked across a courtyard and put herself in the way. And then she had gone back to work. That, he had decided, in the careful way he decided everything, was the most significant thing anyone had done in his presence in years. The Thursdays after the courtyard changed. Same table, same quiet rhythm, but something had moved underneath. A layer that wasn't there before. He began bringing Sua some evenings. The first time Sua walked in, scanned the room, found Nina, and visibly relaxed. The tension leaving her small shoulders, the way tension leaves when you arrive somewhere, and the right person is already there. They developed a ritual. Nina would stop by at the start of the meal. Sua would deliver the week's book recommendation, always with a full explanation. Not just, "This is good," but why, what it did, what she thought it meant. The first was The Little Prince, because it's about how grown-ups forget to see what's important. You see what's important. But I want you to read it anyway. Nina read it that same night. She had read it years ago. It was completely different now. The second was Matilda, because she was underestimated, and she was right about everything anyway. The third was A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, which Sua had pulled from a high shelf in her father's study, without asking permission, because, as she explained firmly, rules about bookshelves were unreasonable. It's about a girl who has nothing and becomes someone. "I've read it," Nina said. Sua looked at her seriously. "What did you think?" "I thought it was about a girl who already was someone," Nina said. She just had to wait for the world to catch up. Sua considered this for a long time. "I think," she said quietly, "that you're like her." Nina said nothing for a moment. "I think," she said at last, "you might be too." From the other side of the table, Jae-hyun said nothing. But something in his face moved. Just slightly. The way something moves when it recognizes itself in something it wasn't expecting. 3 months into the new rhythm of Thursdays, Nina arrived at work on a Tuesday and found an envelope at the staff entrance. Her name. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, 1 page. Short. "You are in a world that is not yours. Leave before it costs you something you cannot replace." Nina read it twice, folded it, put it in her bag. She thought about it the whole subway ride home. She wasn't naive. She knew exactly what this was. Someone was watching Jae-hyun, watching the Thursdays, watching the pattern build. And they had decided she was useful pressure. She had a choice. She could pull back. A waitress who stopped being available for a particular table. Easy. Clean. No confrontation. But she thought about a question Sua had asked the week before. "Are you going to stay?" Not calculated. Not manipulative. Just the clean, direct question of a child who had stopped assuming the answer was yes, but hadn't quite stopped hoping. The fear was real. She didn't pretend it wasn't. But she had come to Seoul alone, with 1 suitcase and a promise, and she had built something real out of nothing. Not because nothing had been hard. Because she had decided long ago that fear could inform her choices, but it would not make them. She went to work on Thursday. When she came to clear his plate, she set the folded note on the table. "I think you should see this," she said. He read it. His face didn't change. He looked up at her. "You came in anyway," he said. "I work here." Nina? Her name? The first time he'd said it. Not the waitress. Not the staff member. Her name like he'd been saying it somewhere else for a while and had finally decided to say it out loud. She met his eyes. "You should have told me immediately," he said. "I'm telling you now. That's not the same." I know, a pause. The restaurant hummed around them. Glass on table. Low music. Someone laughing 2 sections over. "Are you afraid?" he asked. She thought about it. Honestly. "Yes," she said, "but I'm more afraid of who I'd become if I let fear make my choices." He looked at her for a long time. "That," he said quietly, "is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time." He left. But the conversation didn't end there. It was just moving somewhere else. In the way that real conversations between careful people always keep moving underneath the surface, long after the words stop. The man behind the note was named Oh Sang-woo. He had been watching Jae-hyun for years. He was not the confrontational type. He was patient. The kind who learns the shape of a person's life until he finds the part that's softer than the rest. He'd studied Jae-hyun's professional world and found nothing soft there. The man was airtight, disciplined, surrounded by loyal, prepared people. Impossible to move through the front. But then the Thursdays started. The girl started coming, and the waitress started mattering. Oh Sang-woo noted it, the way you note a change in weather. He sent the note. He wanted to see what she'd do. She came in the following Thursday, anyway. He moved to the second stage. Nina finished her closing shift on a Tuesday night at 11:15. She collected her bag, said goodnight to the kitchen staff, and walked out the back entrance toward the car park. 2 men were in the car park, positioned deliberately, between her and the Tucson. Nothing overtly aggressive yet, but positioned in a way that was not accidental, and she understood in the first second exactly what it was. She also understood, in that same second, that she was not alone. Park Ji-soo was leaning against the wall to the left of the entrance, relaxed, patient, 2 men with him. What happened next was fast and very quiet. Nina stood still and watched Ji-soo, and his men handle the situation with the smooth efficiency of people who do this kind of thing as a routine matter. The 2 men left. Ji-soo appeared at her side, perfectly polite. "Madam Nina, the boss would like to speak with you tonight, if that's acceptable." She looked at the now empty car park, at the Tucson untouched, exactly where she'd parked it. "He knew," she said. "He made arrangements," Ji-soo said. After the note, she thought about that. A man who said nothing but moved pieces quietly in the background, making sure she was safe without telling her, without making it a transaction, without asking for anything in return. "Fine," she said. "Lead the way." She sat across from Jae-hyun at nearly midnight, his study. Low lamp on the desk. A glass of water in front of her. Bookshelves behind him, floor to ceiling. The room was cool and still, and smelled faintly of wood and old paper. He told her everything. Not a version. Not a managed account. Everything. Who Oh Sang-woo was. What he wanted. Why Nina was a useful piece to him. What the actual level of risk was and what it wasn't. He gave her the full picture. Because she was someone who needed the full picture to make a real choice. Then he said, "You didn't choose this world. You never asked to be part of it. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But if you want to step back from all of this, I will make sure you are safe and protected in every way I can manage. No conditions. Nothing owed." Nina looked at the desk for a moment. "And if I don't want to step back," she said, "then I'd like to talk about what that looks like," he said. Honestly, with nothing left out. "What does it look like?" He was quiet. He chose his words the way he chose everything, carefully. "It looks like asking you to trust something that isn't clean or simple," he said. "My life is what it is. I can't make it something different, but I can be more present in it than I've been. I can make it a life that's actually lived, not just managed." He looked at her the way he'd been looking at her across all those Thursday tables, but without any of the management now. If that's something worth having. The room was very still. Nina thought about Lagos, about her mother, about the promise on the plane, and what she had actually found at the end of all the distance, and whether the difference between what she'd expected and what had arrived was a loss or something richer than what she'd planned. She thought about Sua pulling stacks of hidden books from under the bed and laying them around herself on the carpet like reclaiming territory. She thought about 2 small fingers closing around the hem of her jacket. "It's worth having," she said. Something in the room shifted. Not dramatically. Just settled. The way a thing settles when it's finally in the right place. Oh Sang-woo was dealt with. The details are not the point. What matters is that Jae-hyun handled it the way he handled everything, quietly, completely, without leaving anything unresolved. The threat dissolved. The pressure came off. The architecture Oh Sang-woo had been building came down in a way that made clear it would not be rebuilt. Some things you do once to send a message that lasts a lifetime. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, Nina sat on the living room floor of Jae-hyun's house. Books spread open all around them, stack on stack, no hiding, no flashlight, just books. Openly arranged, belonging to the space because they did. Sua had been back in school 2 weeks. She had a teacher she liked. She was doing her own pigtails again. 2 of them uneven, exactly the way she preferred. She had laughed at dinner twice in 3 days. The full body laugh, the one too big to stay contained. She was coming back. Children do that. Given time, safety, and proof that the people around them mean what they say, they come back. Not all the way immediately, but in pieces. In the laugh at dinner. In the question asked without checking first whether it's allowed. In the book left out on the table instead of hidden under the mattress. Sua had a question. Nina could tell. She had learned to read Sua silences. The thinking kind was different from the talking kind, and both were different from the holding something kind. This was the holding something kind. "Are you going to stay?" Sua asked. No performance in it. No strategy. Just the clean, direct question of an 8-year-old who had learned that people leave, who had decided to stop assuming the answer was yes, but who had not quite stopped hoping that one day, for someone, the answer would be different. Nina looked at Jae-hyun. He was in the armchair near the window, a book in his hands that he had not been reading. He was watching the two of them. And in his face, that tiredness that had lived behind his eyes across all those Thursday evenings was gone. Not replaced by something big or dramatic. Just gone. Like something set down. Like someone who had finally, after a long time, put a heavy thing on the floor and left it there. Nina looked back at Sua. "Yes," she said, "I'm going to stay." Sua nodded once. The gravity of someone receiving important information and filing it correctly. "Good," she said, "because I have 7 more books you need to read and I've been keeping a list." Nina laughed. Really laughed, the surprised kind, the kind that comes from somewhere under the ribs before you've had a chance to manage it. And Sua grinned, wide, satisfied. Completely herself. And from the armchair near the window, Kwon Jae-hyun set down the book he wasn't reading and watched the two of them, and stayed exactly where he was. There is something you should know about Nina Adie's Okafor. In the wardrobe of Sua's room, tucked in silk uniform, folded with more care than anything else in the cupboard, she had found a small piece of paper, folded into a size of a stamp, soft along every crease, from being carried and held and opened and closed so many times. She had unfolded it quietly, alone. "You will grow up to be extraordinary, I know it. I'm sorry I won't be there to see it." She had folded it back, exactly the same way. Put it back in the pocket of the uniform. And she had said nothing to Sua. She was waiting for the right moment. There was a conversation that still needed to happen. Between Sua and the full truth of what her mother had left behind. Not the leaving, but the other part. The part that said I knew what you would become. That conversation would need the right words and the right time, and the right person sitting beside her when she read it again. Nina would know when it was time. She always knew. On the dashboard of her dark blue Tucson, parked in the bay outside the house that was now also hers, she kept 2 things. The printed car listing from 11 months of saving, creased, faded at the fold. Kept because the evidence of your own effort deserves to be remembered. And a small square of paper she hadn't put there yet. But she would. She sat on the living room floor with Sua and the open books, and the lamp on the low table threw warm light across everything. And outside the window the evening was soft and unhurried. And from the armchair nearby came the quiet presence of a man who had stopped managing everything and started simply being somewhere. Sua opened the first book. "This one," she said firmly. "You have to read slowly. Promise me." "I promise," Nina said, and meant it. Want to know what happened next? Part 2 is available on Gumroad. Link in the description. If this story stayed with you, if it gave you something, please subscribe to AfroKorean Noir Stories and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what we put out next. Every story we tell is made with this same care. Every character built from the ground up. Every moment written to be felt, not just heard. Share this video with someone who would love it. Drop a comment and tell us what part hit you hardest. We read every single one. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.